This is episode 9 of Cup of Chi. I'm Anthony Monteith. I'm here today with Lloyd Chambers, who is a sea swimmer, a personal entrepreneur, a coach, a master of the reishi mushroom. I'm going to hand you over to him. Lloyd, thanks very much for joining us today. Tell the audience what you're about, why you're here, what was your journey. I tried to keep it under an hour and go for it.
All right. Well, look, hello, everybody. How's it going? I am calling in here from Wicklow, Ireland. And for those of you maybe listening to this from overseas, it's on the east coast of Ireland, just south of the capital city there, Dublin City. Okay. So I live very close to the sea right now. And, you know, for a long time, my goal was to live close to the sea. And now that's exactly where I live. And that didn't happen by mistake. It happened by design. And like a lot of the things that I now get to enjoy and that I'm very, very grateful for, I might add, they didn't happen by mistake. And there were certainly plenty of things, circumstances, situations that could have sent me in a different direction. In fact, for many years, they did. But eventually I came back and found a center of sorts. And now I call it my center. Right? It doesn't necessarily corroborate what anyone else is doing. But for me, it's my center. And as a result of that, you know, I've been able to impact the lives of lots of people around the world, in running into the thousands at this point, by, I guess, just getting clear what's going on between their ears. There is nothing in between you and what you want, except your belief that it's possible, that you have the right to even dream it. And also you're in the way a lot of the time. So, you know, if we kind of move back to our earliest joy-filled activity, you know, that we really used to enjoy. So you move back to maybe 6 or 7 years old, right? There are things we just love to do. We just did them all day. It was before someone stood on our dreams or started to squish us into this little cube they want us to be in, right? Or started to tell us, oh, you're not smart enough, or you're not this enough, or you're not fast enough, or whatever. Now, for some people, it started a little bit earlier. Some people didn't happen until much later, but I remember this vividly because in primary school, they used to tell you that you can do anything. World is your oyster. It was a famous one they used to say all the time, right? But then as you got a little bit older and you made that transition from primary school into secondary school, which some of you guys might know as high school, right? When you make that transition, suddenly everything changes. The rules change, the foundational principles change, and where you stand in that world changes immediately because you just come out of an environment where you were at the pinnacle of primary school, right? Because there's only typically 6 years in it, right? And so you get to the end and people, you've got respect, you've got clarity, you know where you are, you know where you stand, you have some understanding of your personality, which is developed at that point. You know, you're not being overly challenged by the curriculum and things of that nature, right? Then you move into secondary school and you are like this tiny little thing and you're surrounded by everybody's bigger than you. I went to secondary school at 11, right? I was the youngest by a year and a half within my own year. And then everyone else is bigger and older and all the rest of it. It's like getting lost in a sea, you know? So if you imagine you were rooted in the sand and suddenly a wave comes and takes you out to sea and you're just floating around. You don't have any center. You don't know where you are. You don't know what to do. As a result of that, and I guess a lot of people are, you know, fall into that bracket for one reason or another. Maybe their parents moved around a lot or their dad's always working. There's always something going on at home that moves us into a place where we're not in our center. But we oftentimes forget about how we felt as a 6 or 7 year old and what it is that we like to do. And as a result of that, we go and we do things that are either as far away from the core values we were taught, or we just find ourselves drifting, one or the other. So for me personally, when I was 11-year-old, I already smoked cigarettes. I already smoked joints. Yeah. I started drinking alcohol twice a week at 11. Right?
Wow.
You know what I mean? Because I was in first year. You know, in first year, what do they do? Kids go and they drink on the weekend in the fields and things like that. In Ireland, anyway. For anyone listening elsewhere in the world, you're probably horrified and appalled. But in Ireland, that was normal, relatively. Okay, maybe not at 11, but for second, third year olds who were typically a lot older, right? So that's sort of a behavior and interaction with addictive substances for me started very early on.
Right.
And, you know, it's very easy to kind of point fingers at where the challenges were coming from. But regardless of what anyone's challenges are, there's challenges. You know what I mean? So like if you look at people that are very wealthy, their challenges, maybe they don't see their father very often. You see people who are maybe not doing so well, and maybe they see a lot of their father, and maybe that's the problem. You know, so
yeah.
You know, because maybe he's out with the boozer all day and he comes home and he's not sharing the love around, right? Mm-hmm. Or whatever. Like everyone's got problems, right? And everybody interprets them in different ways. So whether they're big or small, you're a child. You know, children don't understand big and small in the same way, right? So when you're like 8, 9 years old, you don't know what's a big deal or what's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. You know, we've gone into other people's houses at that age and felt a weird vibe where everything's silent. People around everybody just can't hear a word out of anybody. They're like, something's going on here. I don't know what it is. Can't put my finger on it, but I don't want to stay here any longer than it's necessary. You know, go back to that friend's house. You know what I mean? So you just don't know what people are dealing with when they're growing up. So for me personally, then I want to just share one very small example. So when I was about 15 or 16, a book came out called The Celestine Prophecy. Some of your listeners may have read the book, right?
Yeah, I've heard of it. You know, I've never read it, but a lot of my colleagues around the world rave about it.
It's a great book. And they made a movie about it, which is proper 1990s movie where it's like, you know, it's all cheesy, pixelating and stuff. It was on a VCR. it's hilarious. But the principles are sound. And because the book was posed as a fiction, like the story was posed as a fiction, that it was easy for us to kind of create distance between us and it and say, oh, it's a story. But as a 15-year-old, I didn't know that. So, and I wanted to believe still. I was still at that point where my dreams were real enough for me to want to be able to step into a reality other than what I was seeing around me, because I felt there was a lot missing there. Yeah. So that being said, I read the book and I was like, wow, we can talk to plants. There's energy everywhere. It's like, this makes perfect sense. And then I read it again at 26 years old. Okay, I was living in Barcelona, running amok, all right, like on a wild one. And I remember reading it and I thought, how gullible are people? What a load of absolute horse crap. Right. So then I read it again when I was 34 and I went, wow, I was pretty woke as a 15-year-old. Now, the book didn't change. It's in fact the same edition because I had it at home. And it's just important for us to understand that whatever stage we're at in our life will determine how we interpret what we see. And it's really the lens that we're looking through. It's our perspective, right? And that can change due to various different things. And so what we're noticing at the moment is that a lot of people's perspectives are changing. You know, the social landscape's changed a lot. We probably all, I'm guessing everybody's noticed, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, there's little sparks going off in my head when you're saying these things, because for me, that awakening started at a very young age at 4, but I had to do the suppression thing. So I had that awakening at 4 years of age. And then I had to build all these structures within my belief systems that were separated. So a lot of my friends used to say to me, you know, you're quite judgmental, you know, or you like everything to be in its box. Like, this person is this way, that person is that way. And it's taken me a long time to break those down and integrate them. So for you, that awakening at 15 for you, it wasn't even an awakening. It was just, that's the norm for you. Is that right to say that?
Yeah, it was at the time. So just to put it into perspective, my family life was a little bit not typical, I'll say.
Okay. So
my father was still is self-employed, runs a couple of businesses and so on. So he also was one of those maverick type of individuals. So you ask him any question, he doesn't know the answer. But if you want to get stuff done, he's the man you talk to. So, my mother, on the other hand, was the expert in everything. Any question you ask her, she has the answer in a heartbeat. So they were both very different, but both had like skill sets that are admirable, and depending on what the circumstance is, right? We also grew up as macrobiotics. So everything in the house was a whole food. There was no sugar of any kind. I had sugar the first time I was 8 years old. No red meat. I think I had red meat on Christmas morning, and we had a rasher when I was 11. It was the first time.
Wow.
And there was this whole debate, which is a hilarious story that my parents still joke about. My father came home from work one day and he looked in the press over the fridge and he saw Country Store. If you remember, that was the first muesli in Ireland. And he looked at it, he looked at the back of it and he saw sugar. He goes, "What's this?" My mother was like, "Oh, well, I thought the kids would like it." He said, "I didn't spend 25 years keeping sugar out of this house to let it come in now. It goes or I go." He was deadly serious. He was going to walk out the door like.
That's amazing. So you've had a really, for some people, you've had an unusual, you're not the typical Irish upbringing until this thing happened at 11.
No,
was that your breaking away? Was that like your rebellious way of saying, right, I'm going to try to be like the other kids?
Well, no, not really. No, it's just it's about association. Everything in life is about association. Until you're at the point where you're making concrete, unconditional decisions yourself, everything is about association and environment. This whole nature nurture thing, I'm not sold on it. As far as I'm concerned, if you have a child, they're 2 years old, you send them to China. When they're 5 years old, they don't remember English, they speak Chinese now. So it has nothing to do with who you are or where you came from, except from a spiritual perspective, perhaps. But physically, I think that everything is about the environment that you're in. And the fact that you can navigate out of and overcome those circumstances, it takes a decision in order to do so. If you're just going with the flow and being, mirroring your environment, you're going to look very much like your environment. So my environment changed. So I went from primary school locally to a secondary school up the road, where my parents were originally Protestant at one point, before my father told my mother that we're not going to church anymore. She wasn't entirely sold on, but that was the day that was in it. That was male was making the decisions there, right? So anyway, so we never got baptized, never went to church, none of that. And then because I had as a young child, my older brothers and sisters I'm the youngest of four, right? They were going to Irish college, which is very common. It's kind of like a camp for anyone who's not in Ireland. It's like a summer camp, but you speak the Gaelic language,
right,
which is completely different to English. To give you an example for the listeners, if any of them are not Irish, instead of saying hello, how are you, we'd say Dia chuit chunasatatu. So it's a completely different paradigm altogether.
Yeah.
Which means way of life, belief, thinking, etc. Okay, so I went there as a 5-year-old. And I went every year as a 5, 6, 7, all the way up to 10, before I went and picked my secondary school, which was an all Irish school. So we did everything. I learned everything in Gaelic. So I learned science, I learned French in Irish, learned maths in Irish, learned everything. So
did you start dreaming in Irish? Were you like, when you had dreams, were you conversing in Irish?
Yeah, I can still do that from time to time on demand. Yeah. It depends how much control you have over your dreams. That's a totally different conversation. But we could go down the rabbit hole there.
There's a rabbit hole.
So, so when I got to secondary school, then I went to an all-Irish school. And so I was there was, I think, 800 students. I'm 11. The youngest other one was like 13 or something, or 12 or 13. And, there's people that are nearly 20 there who are a little bit slower than others, let's say. So there's an entire range of that 11 to 20 age group. I'm the youngest, the smallest, and the only Protestant. You can imagine.
A minority within a minority within a minority.
Yeah, it was pretty amusing. So I had to assimilate pretty quick. In order to survive. You just can't survive in an environment like that.
No.
But particularly when it's very easy to point the finger at the one who's responsible.
Yeah, you become a
historically
chameleon.
Wise. Yeah, you have to. Yeah. So yeah, there was a lot of that, and then I guess I just I was very excited about the prospect of being here in this spiritual world, having an emotional experience in the human body at the age of 15, 16. In fact, I went off and became a Hare Krishna monk for a little while at 16.
Wow.
Yeah, my eldest brother was a Hare Krishna monk for 12 years, so he was a devotee at the time. And so I went to Paris at 16 to visit my uncle, and then I met the Hare Krishnas there, and then I shaved my head and had that Sika thing in the back, and tilak on the forehead and all that. Yeah. And then I went to UK, went to Soho Street, met some of the Harrys there, and ended up in the manor up on the A1 near Watford, which was George Harrison gave to the Harrys in the 60s.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so I spent some time up there, and I remember thinking, I was about to get on a bus to go and live in a organic farm in the mountains in a little valley in Hungary in 1998. And then my parents said, "You're not getting on that bus."
You might never come back, eh?
Yeah, but it's funny now, because now I'm like looking around trying to figure out how to grow my own food and all this sort of stuff. But now I would have already known all that. So it's kind of funny how these things come in roundabouts.
So you've kind of led a little bit. You've had quite a spiritual. You've had these interludes of spirituality. So that brought you up to your late teens, early 20s, and then what happened?
Then I just went on a rampage. I just hit the rave scene, basically.
How old are you? Do you mind me asking?
Now 40.
40. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm about 2 years ahead of you then.
Yeah. So I drum and bass was my thing.
Okay.
So particularly drum and bass from the end in London. It's a very specific type of drum and bass.
Right.
And so I just sort of spent my time going from party to party for about 8 or 9 years, having a great time around the world.
When you talk to your friends in your immediate circle, and maybe your old friends from when you were a kid, they look at your life and they go, "Wow, you completely went for it." Or
kind of the lads that I went
Lloyd,
to,
let him do his thing, sort of thing.
Yeah, good question. I mean, when I think about me as a teenager, because I moved school then. I moved to another school called the School of Philosophy.
Huh.
It's called John Scottus. So they have a philosophy there, and the Latin, because every school has a motto, right? Mm-hmm. So their motto is "Lightus impraesius," which means delight in the present. In fact, I was going to start with a meditation, but we're already started now. So maybe
we can finish with a meditation.
We can finish with one. Yeah, that's true. And so, that was an interesting place. So those kids it was an experiment, essentially. It's kind of like a Steiner school, but they had started it off their own back, based on Vedic principles. So they taught Vedic maths, they taught Sanskrit, they taught loads of things of that nature. Classical studies was huge there, and things like that. And so those kids, every time we would meet up after we finished school, when I was, for the next, say, I don't know, maybe 10 years, because, we drift away after that because people move to different countries, right? But within that kind of 5 to 10 year period, every year they were saying, I was asking, what are you doing? And they said, oh, I'm studying now. I'm going to be a barrister, or I'm going to be a lawyer, or I'm going to be a doctor, or now I'm a surgeon, or now I'm this, that, and the other. And they were like, but we all want to be doing what you're doing, Lloyd. Like every time we see you, you're talking about what we actually want to do, but we're actually doing what our parents want us to do. And so it's kind of fascinating to watch. So, yeah, I just did what I wanted to do, regardless of what anyone else wanted.
Mm-hmm.
For the majority. Now, I'm a parent now, so obviously things change a little, because your now focus is not you in the same way. Your focus is your responsibility to something bigger than you. You know?
Yeah.
And so that changes everything.
For sure.
In my experience. Yeah.
For sure. I have 2 children, and I have a 13-year-old son who's like 6 foot tall, you know, and he's so very different to all his friends, and he sees life in a very, very different way. And it's a challenge for him. Mm-hmm. He's
particularly at that age.
Yeah. He's got these adaptive skills that he's like, I'm saying this with bias, of course, but he's not like any other child I've met. And then there's my daughter, who is, I don't think I've ever met anyone that's so full of joy. I mean, she had one little melt. She has a meltdown maybe every 3 to 4 months. She just has a little bit of a meltdown. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's incredible. And I look at
what age is she?
She's 9. She'll tell you she's 9.5. Okay. But she just sees life. I just can't even begin to describe how amazing she is that way. Now, she's her room is total chaos, you know. Mm-hmm. And if I was her age, you know, back in my day, that room you'd be told tidy up. But we give her leeway for expression. She's very creative, arty, you know, crafty. She can be a little bit devious, you know, a little bit kind of not telling the truth, but I see a bit of me in her that way. When I was a kid, I'd kind of manipulate my parents a bit to get what I wanted, but she's a good heart. She's a caring heart, a little bit lazy, but then when she does something, she really goes for it. Like, she's a wall climber. She's a badminton player. She's a swimmer. You know, She does so many things, and she tries so hard to be friends with people. Whereas my son is more of a recluse. He'll hide away in his room, you know, and he's very much that gaming nerd. You know, he has the hair kind of, he grows his fringe like this to hide his face. He actually, you know, he's just, but he's very suspicious of the world. You know, he's like, he doesn't take everything on face value, which I like about it. And he's incurious. Like, he'll ask me some very profound questions, and I'm like, oh gosh, right, I wasn't ready for that, you know. So I think I'm lucky. My wife is she's the fiery redhead Irish woman, but is very organized. She likes to plan. She's a doer. I'm the creative one. I'm the one that comes up with the ideas, but in some ways, she is creative. She just doesn't always recognize it, if you know what I mean. So we work really well as a team. And through this chaos that we've been navigating the last 2 years, we've managed to move house. We've managed to move from, we kind of moved around locations a lot over the last 17 years. We managed to situate ourselves in the middle of countryside on a hill, surrounded by 4 acres, 2 streams, a little bit of a wood, and it's like a retreat. So no matter what I do in my job and my work and my whatever, we're living in a retreat, you know.
Beautiful.
And I think the essence I'm getting from you is the more you move towards what you really want to do, things start to align with you. Is that a right way of saying it? Or
yeah, I mean, you need to touch base with yourself regularly. You have some sort of practice that gets you out of your head and into your body. Because, you know, by the time you're 35 years old, your body has a memorized set of thoughts, feelings, and actions expressed in the chemicals in your body and your brain fires the same way, it's wired the same way, and it becomes you think it's your personality. It's just the way you've thought, the thoughts that you've held consistently influence the actions that you do continuously, which becomes your behaviors. Your behaviors inform what you consider to be your personality.
Mm-hmm.
But all that is your personal reality, as Joe Dispenza would say. So what that means is that in order for you to get something other than what you have currently as an external reality for yourself, you need to start by recognizing that you are not who you think you are. So I took a bit of a turn there. So
Yeah. Okay. Bombshell.
So,
drop.
Yeah. So if we just think about it, right? If we attempt to meditate, because you don't know, are you doing meditation well or not well? I mean, it's not a competitive behavior, so it's hard to tell. So you're sitting there, let's say you look at a candle and you want to focus your mind and you just feed all the thoughts that come in, just feed it to the candle. Okay? The thoughts are now gone, but you're still present. Same way if you sit here and you meditate and you watch the thought come and the thought goes, but you are still present. So you go, well, hold on a minute. So I'm not my thoughts. That's interesting. And so we know from physics that we are also not our body, because our body is just little bits of, various different aspects moving at certain frequencies and vibrations. So we're not our body, right? We're not our mind. We're not our thoughts. We recognize that when we lose consciousness, we stop being we're no longer the observer. Okay, so from that we can assume that we're also not our personality, we're not our nation, we're not our race. So who are we? It's important to have some sort of an idea who we are. So if we want to have a different reality, we're going to need to go back to the very beginning and rebuild ourselves from the very get-go.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have a look at, say, our subconscious mind controls 95% of what we do on a day-to-day, and only 5% of it is conscious. So I'll give you an example just to put this into context. If we have the 4 stages of learning, and I'm going to use the example of a small child in a car. Okay, they're not driving, obviously. So the small child, 2 or 3 years old, they're looking out the window, right? Like my daughter at her age, right? She knows there's other cars, but she doesn't know how the car drives.
Mm-hmm.
She certainly doesn't know how to drive the car. Okay, so she's unconsciously incompetent at car driving. Okay, that's the first stage. Okay, as she gets a little bit older, she's going to recognize how to drive the car, but won't be able to physically drive the car. So she becomes consciously incompetent. As she gets to 16, 17, 18, or whatever the law is at that time, and she starts to do her lessons and passes the test and then starts driving, she will be consciously competent at the task of driving the car. And she's at 10 and 2, and she's like stuck up near the window. She's got a big N in the back of the window, all that stuff. And she'll take...
stealing your car keys, Lloyd, to go off.
Oh, yeah, no problem. No problem. And so she'll be doing all that, right? But these days, I drive home from wherever, daytime, nighttime, and have almost no recollection of how I got there, whether there were traffic lights or not, whether I changed lanes or not. You can't remember any of it because it's irrelevant. You're focused, probably thinking about something else. But you were doing it. You weren't doing it dangerously, but you were unconsciously competent. So that's how your brain learns. And if you had to be consciously competent of everything you're doing at any given time as an adult with multiple tasks on the go, you'd have a nervous breakdown in a heartbeat. Like immediately, schizophrenia straight away, your whole mind will fall apart. And so it's designed to keep certain activities that are consistently done and start to put them into the hard drive. So if we've got an operating system the same way as a computer would, and you recognize the certain programs that are running in the background there to keep everything working, as soon as you identify that the thoughts, feelings, actions, etc., are in an operating system and you're now objectively observing the operating system, you can now start to disconnect from them a little bit. and objectively say, oh, so those are the tapes, for those of you who remember cassette tapes, that are running in the background that are controlling 95% of my thoughts, feelings, actions, behaviors, and what I perceive in the world. So if I want to have a world where I am happy versus miserable, I want to have a happy where I am affluent versus poverty-stricken. If I want to have a reality where I am loved versus despised, or whatever emotion, or where I'm enough versus not enough, that this is where I need to look to work on changing those things. So I first must recognize I am not my thoughts, feelings, and actions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it harkens me back to martial arts days, that I started training properly when I was 11, but it took a long time. It literally took maybe to about 15 or 16 before I was at that level where I could, dish out a kick or a block or whatever, a counter move without, just based on pure instinct or reaction, And yeah, I remember thinking, even learning to drive, the same kind of thing. This is what you've just said. I had a very patient driving instructor, thank God, but I wasn't a natural at it, and then learning
that's a really good point.
Yeah.
About not being a natural, right? Because people think they need to be naturally good at something in order to be successful at it. That's total nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
All you need is a desire
Yes.
to do it and get better at it.
Yeah.
And I don't think people give a whole lot of thought to that. Certainly not often enough, in my opinion, at least. And it reminds me of something which I'm going to pull up on my in the background here in front of me, just so I can make sure I share it accurately. But there's something that I was just thinking about. There's something called, which I'm sure you will have heard of, something called the Ikigai.
Oh yes, it's like 3. It's something
There's
I only came
4 of them.
across last year. It's like a Venn diagram, isn't it? Like 3 circles.
It's 4 circles. I mean, I can share it, so if you want, we're both looking at it. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
You got to let me share screen now.
Oh, sorry. My bad. So more. And what do? I put you into...
Just make me a co-host and then I'll be able to share.
There we go. Make Lloyd Chambers the co-host. There we go.
Okay. There we go. So part of establishing your life's purpose is kind of the reason why we're talking about this. But nonetheless, if you can see the screen here, can you see?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So what we have is what you love, and we have what you're good at. We have what someone will pay for, and then we have what the world needs. And what you're looking for is a sweet spot in the middle. So many of us are doing what we think is necessary in order to pay the bills.
Yeah.
Not recognizing a number of things. Number one, money isn't real, aside from anything else. It's just energy. And since 1971, currency. It literally hasn't been real. Yeah. It's not real at all. It used to be physical value, like coins that had gold and silver.
Camels.
And things of that nature, And so it had intrinsic value. So when you wanted to carry it from one place to the next, you would get a piece of paper from the bank. You would go then to another bank where you're going, and you would get the same piece of paper and give it to them. They give you back coin, and then you head on, so you don't get robbed on the road. That was the reason why they brought it in, supposedly.
Yeah.
However,
that's actually still on some of the currencies. A promise to pay the bearer.
It's a promissory note, is what it is. It's an IOU, basically. Yeah. But as soon as the government steps in to guarantee that this piece of paper has a value, then if the government goes down, it doesn't have any value anymore, because it doesn't actually have any intrinsic value. So money's not real, but it's also not real anyway, because it's an arbitrary system we created. So if we just imagine for a moment, you take all the people off planet Earth, money disappears immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So that means people are the only ones who believe money is real, and people are the source of all wealth on the planet. where we choose to spend our money or where we choose to spend our energy, what we choose to do in order to gain money is an expenditure of energy. So it's very, very important where we direct our energy, because it is the entire source of wealth on this planet. It comes from us, not from big companies that sell us stuff that we may or may not need, but in fact, us ourselves. So we need to be very clear on this Ikigai, because what are we here for?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are we exchanging our life for? Because our life's going to end. Be very sure of that. In fact, it's the only thing we're sure of. They say that we should be sure of also of taxes, but that's a line from the wonderful Edward Bernays, the grandfather of
very wealthy people. I'm sure they don't experience.
Well, yeah, but so does it. Have you heard of Edward Bernays?
I haven't. No, tell me more.
He is the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and he is the grandfather of something called spin. It's a type of marketing where they make up things that sound logical and then insert them into the social memory, even though they're not true and have no founding in any way, shape, or form in reality, except
it's a bit like what we've all been going through the last 2 years, right?
Basically. Yeah, it is. So if people keep saying things like it's lonely, and I'll get you to complete this for me, man. It's lonely at the
top.
Money is the root of all
evil.
It's easier for a rich man to get into heaven than a camel to go through the eye of a
needle.
Right. That doesn't necessarily mean it's true. It just means that everybody knows how to finish the sentence, right?
Yes.
So equally, the only thing guaranteed in life is death, and taxes is absolute horseshit. However, everybody agrees on it. So I spent most of my life not agreeing with what other people think, because I'm not interested in what other people think in relation to whether I should think it or not think it. It's not that I don't respect other people's views, because I do, but I don't going to make them my views. You know, and I'm also not looking to give my views and make them anyone else's. It's not important to me whether people agree with me or not, or if they see things the same way. I'm in my center, and that's good enough for me as far as I'm concerned. What I'm interested in is helping people who want to be helped.
Right.
Because I remember a couple of years ago, I was speaking to a gentleman called Jim Britt. He's the guy who found Tony Robbins in the early 70s and trained him.
Right.
So Tony's doing pretty well, I think we could argue. So Jim Britt certainly knows a thing or two. And what he said was, someone can only be your client, your customer, or your partner if they have three things. Number one, they have a pain or a problem. Number two, they want to solve it, which is a very important factor. And the third one is they think that you can help them solve it. Because if they don't, they won't listen to you. If they don't want to solve it, you're wasting your time. And if they don't have a pain or a problem, why are you looking at it? What are you doing there? Exactly.
Yeah.
You know,
that's my last 27 years as a therapist. I can tell you that straight out.
Yeah. No, it's huge. And the amount of times I've tried to help people that I genuinely don't want any help, but I thought they did, and I wanted more than they wanted it, and it was not very fruitful.
No.
That being said, so just coming back to this, because we might need to have a second episode the way this is going.
Yeah, for sure. I'm thinking, like, we haven't even got to your late 20s yet. We're already in this.
So check this out. When I was younger, I thought that, in fact, I was told, if you want to do what you love, you'll be poor. If you want to do what someone will pay for, you'll have money, because they'll pay for it. Right? So I was like, hold on a second, man. There's something not quite right there. Nobody talked about what the world needs, which is kind of like a product market fit, basically. And nobody talked about what you're good at, because they thought that what you're good at is a stationary thing. You're either good at it or you're not. Like, I don't know about that now. So what I'm starting to understand is what you love, you can get good at. And if you partner with people that have a route to market and have something that's a way to monetize what your skills are and what your unique thing to bring to the world is, then you don't need to worry about the other two sides of it. So what I've been doing for the last couple of years is I've been working with a bunch of entrepreneurs from around the world to build an ecosystem and a platform built on mutual aid, cooperation, collaboration, where it doesn't reward competition or competitive behavior in any way, shape, or form, and where we're co-creating value together. We've also built an economic model into the background so that everybody can turn it into a source of income, but they're only ever turning up to talk about what they are passionate about. So like anyone who tells you should work on your weaknesses isn't paying attention. Right. You should be focused on what you're good at, and you should be looking to partner with anyone who's good at something you're not good at, because then you don't have to learn it.
Yeah.
But we got, how much time do you think you have that you can be like, so one of the guys I'm partnered with is a guy called Mark Santos, and he produced the platform on which this PDF I'm sharing with you is on, right?
Okay.
And he spent the last 40 plus years coding, building information networks and information systems. He went to Silicon Valley in 2004 with something which was a precursor to Netflix, and they told him that'll never work. He's like, so I'm early to the party, I see. You know what I mean?
Brilliant.
And things of that nature, right? And I
remember messing around with bloody, what's the name of that thing? Not before there was torrents, I can't remember it. But anyway, we were ripping music off the internet.
That's right, before uTorrent.
Yeah, way before that. I can't remember. It was in the early 2000s. Can't remember the name of the platform. But it was all going on then, wasn't it? Late 90s.
Yeah. And so, I don't want to spend 40 years learning how to code to the level of this gentleman. I just don't have it. First of all, I don't know what code looks like. Never mind how to write it, or what the different languages
will probably
are.
show you when she's about 4.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. But like these are the things. So like, there's also lots of people that I know who are way more spiritually connected than I am.
Mm-hmm.
Should I spend all my time doing that, or should I focus on where I can bring value to the people that need to bridge the gap?
Mm-hmm.
So like my main focus is helping people bridge the gap and getting them closer to the information and the association that they're going to need in order to make the transition into the self or the person they admire enough to do the work to move towards. You know what I mean?
What did it take for you to get to that position, to make that decision? This is that for you, I presume what you're doing is that star in the center.
Mm-hmm.
Am I correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm helping people with the process of understanding that this is something that they can do. Yeah.
So you're a mentor. You're in some ways a coach.
I guess so. I mean,
a facilitator.
Here's how I work. I used to take on students.
Yeah.
Okay. And clients. I don't do that anymore.
Okay.
All I do now is I partner with people in the game of life. Why do I do that? Is because we all win when we all win. So the question very simply is, instead of us thinking about life in a transactional way, or, hey, I've got value for you and you'll give me some of that fake money, and then I will give you a service and then you wander off. Well, where is the compounding of value? There isn't any.
I get you. I'm getting.
So if we're
kind of, it's going in now. Yeah.
So if we're working collaboratively, every win for you is a win for me, and every win for me is a win for you if we choose to partner together in the way that we do things. We set up this platform for this purpose. So the idea is that there's an idea called the mastermind. Been around for a long time. You could argue the 12 apostles were Jesus' mastermind, so it's not like it's a new thing or anything. But the idea is that and this doesn't have a religious context for anyone who's triggered by what I just said.
It's more about listening to wisdom.
It's about being in an environment where you are building one another up. You're supporting one another in times of challenge, overcoming adversity together, celebrating wins together, choosing to celebrate one another. And it's complete non-judgment with no competition of any kind. So you can be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. You can be supported. you can support others, and you come to the mastermind for what you can give, not what you can get. And as a result, we're creating real relationships, authentic relationships. It's not about transactions. Now, when we develop know, like, and trust, transactions happen all day long because people feel comfortable and they know that they're going to get more value than their cost, and they know they're reinvesting into a relationship that matters to them, that brings real value to their life. And so transactions aren't an issue. But if we come at it from a transactional point of view, we just look like, we can potentially look like a perpetrator. Okay, so if we look at, we're body, mind, and soul, or body, mind, spirit. And, you know, from the spiritual traditions, this is what's talked about quite a lot. And the world currently is predominantly driven by fear-based paradigm, which means there's a perpetrator, there's a victim, and there's a rescuer. I was like, I want to rescue all the victims from the perpetrators, or I want to become the perpetrator just for a moment so I can get the other perpetrator, so I can make them the victims, and then, you know, so I can be rescued. And it's all just fear porn, basically, right? But there's an alternative. And the opposite to fear, you could say, is love. But then again, for love, you'll do some pretty horrible things if somebody upsets anyone you love. So maybe love's not the right word, at least not in English. So maybe joy is a better word. Fear or joy. So if I'm making my decisions out of joy, well, what do you want to do when you're in joy-filled abundance and in creation? You want to create, you want to innovate, you want to build, you want to support, you want to do all those things. And that means personal leadership. You need to become someone that's worth following. And then you want to gather people around you and start building a tribe. Because if it's not already obvious, the world's a bit fucked right now.
Totally fucked, yeah.
So, yeah, totally fucked. So what I'd like to just offer as
fuck people, quick, Lloyd.
I'm going to present a possibility.
Okay, go for it.
And it's literally just a possibility, right? So the possibility is that what if what we're going through currently is like a spiritual birth of a new reality? Okay?
Yeah.
And in the last moments of birth, there's a lot of contraction. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of suffering.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very, very intense energy. And if you if you're a woman hearing this, and you've had a child, you already know this. But if you're a man, turn to your woman and look in her eyes, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. And understand that's what it takes to birth a new world. And maybe there's a possibility that we are the midwives of this new world. We just need to keep it together. Yeah. And we need to focus on joy and love and appreciation and respect. And always looking to see where we can build win-wins and tribes and unity with one another, and focus on community. Because if we do that, we move further and further away from that fear porn reality. However, if we join groups like I have, and they start off with, oh, isn't it great that such and such happened? And isn't it great that that's been overcome? And isn't it great? And suddenly it starts becoming, hey, look what I saw. Hey, look what they're doing now. Hey, look at this. And suddenly it's fear porn central again, right? Which is what everyone was trying to get away from.
Yeah.
You need to be very careful that you don't engage in that too much. In fact, I would say not at all, right? Some people feel a need to be informed. I personally don't. I don't care what's going on in the world. It's not my responsibility, in the sense that by giving it energy, I make it more real. And if we all have our attention on it, well, energy flows where attention goes. So if we're going to give a lot of energy to a fear-based narrative, I don't think that's going to be helpful. Yeah. So I think that we need to be building alternatives.
I think it would be different if there was a catastrophe. You know, literally, if you left your door and there were bodies piled up outside on the street, then I think that would be a different world we're living in. But at the moment, there's a lot of nonsensical, unjustifiable logic. And
well, that's an intentional process. So
So,
if I want to confuse somebody,
yeah,
I'm going to compliment them and insult them at the same time.
Yeah.
And they're going to not know which to act on. And then they become pacified. And then I can give them an instruction and they'll probably go do it. So,
yeah, it's funny when going back to the beginning of this conversation, you talked about the 6 and the 7-year-old kids. I remember my final year at university where we were studying child psychology. I'm a health scientist originally. I'm a Western. That's my original training. I now practice Oriental medicine. But I remember them talking and being very adamant about this concrete phase, this phase that when you reach 7, pretty much most of your beliefs, most of the way you try to build what they call the concrete understanding of the world is at 7. And now that we've had this conversation, this thought arose or came down into my head saying, yeah, but what if that idea of that being concrete is because of the schooling system? What is it? Is it because, as you know, we're looking at life everyone's looking at life through a specific lens. And what if we just put a filter on that and say, right, the experts say kids have a concrete foundation on their beliefs at 7. And then everybody goes, yeah, that's the norm,
That's something called agreed imagined reality.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that can be installed. This is like a program saying, I'm trying to think of a useful example from looking at my computer keyboard. It's coming to me.
Quick.
I didn't spend enough time on it.
I have loads of stuff that I refer to. I always have books, lying around.
Yeah. I guess just if we're going to talk about the education system very briefly, it's not, I'm not going to send my daughter to school. At all, under any circumstances. It's not a safe place as far as I'm concerned. And I don't value what goes on there. Not because I don't value the information. The delivery, I'm not interested in. And so...
It's an industrial system.
It's an industrial complex, yeah. And it just creates an environment in which there's no opportunity to question authority. And that instills that in the entire population from a very early age.
You want to have seen my old school. My God, 1720 it was built in. And you cross those gates and you look like you were going into a military compound.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Terrifying.
It's a military, the structure of it is structured around the way the military works. Now, I'm not against the idea of a military, by the way, in terms of what they teach you. But the structure in which there's no way to question authority, now that's an issue. So I'm not against the idea of having a martial aspect.
Yes.
But I think that it needs to be governed through your center, not through an external center. I'll give you an example of what I mean here. We have lost the initiation ceremonies that we used to use in the Celtic past, although our past wasn't strictly Celtic, but we'll leave that aside. And so we, particularly as young boys going into manhood, need to be tested. And it's important. It's a very important part to understand. We can stand on our own 2 feet. We have a center. We're not here to make other people happy. We're not here to placate other people. We're here to be authentically in our center and turn up as ourselves. And if people resonate with that, fantastic. If people do not, we need to find other people who do. And never, ever be thinking that there's something wrong with us. Okay, so in order for that to be the case, there has to be some checks and balances, obviously, because you can imagine that could easily turn into, So you're guided through an initiation process by a group of older males who guide you through. This is not the
Cobra Kai, Lloyd. This is not the Cobra Kai.
So this is what happens in gang culture, but it happens in a perverted way.
Yeah.
Again, not perverted in that sense, but like perverted in the sense that it's not aligned with what its original intention was. And I think it's really important. And you were talking earlier about male mental health, and it starts very young. So there's a book called The Boy Crisis, which you may have read.
Okay.
And it talks about the fact that boys and girls from up until the age of 8 have a similar likelihood to commit suicide. Obviously that's a horrifying thing in itself, but it's on a par. From 8 to 12, it's now 2 to 1 that boys will make that decision. From 12 to 15, it's 4 to 1. From 15 to 18, it's 6 to 1.
Right.
And from 18 to 25, it's 16 to 1. So do we have a bit of an issue there? I'd argue there's something very wrong there. So
sure.
It continues, obviously, after 25, as probably noticed over the last 20 odd months, because there's been a lot of that. But
absolutely. I mean,
it's because of a lack of a center, I believe. We need to feel like we're able to speak, we're able to be heard, and someone needs to hold space for us. It's about holding space, really. And for you doing traditional Chinese medicine, I don't know whether holding space is something that's done in that tradition.
See, I don't practice the TCM. TCM is again was brought in the 50s. Now I've learned it. It's a conglomeratory of it's a merging of West and East together. But I've been delving slowly into the classical. What changed it for me was practicing Qigong, because I was just fortunate enough, to be, I'm going to say guided, or I guided myself into the practice of Qigong. And the particular college or school or style is a center-led school. So it's all about moving from the center first, whether it's in a 5 elemental approach, whether it's a Taoist approach, whether it's a more Confucian approach. And it's helped me a lot. I'm not saying it's made me superhuman in any way. No, I can't, set fire to things with my eyeballs or anything like that. But it's brought me into...
Not yet, you mean?
Not yet, working on it. But I've been... it's given me something that is I'm going to say a foundation, but a consistent. So it goes from practicing literally standing or moving or breathing to being something that literally, even when I'm making a cup of tea, I can go into that space of just being present, being in the center, bringing my energy, literally physically, mentally, emotionally, bringing it in. I suppose I'm lucky. I'm still working on it. I'm sure there's people out there that do appear on the face of it to be doing Qigong more gracefully, but I know what's going on in the inside for me, and it's a constant change, and there's a challenge with it. It's not easy. And it's super interesting you talked about that initiation, because a friend of mine who's actually in one of the podcasts earlier on, Jonathan Chubbs, he brought his son over to see me and a friend of mine who's a sword master, and we brought Jonathan's son out into the wilderness, not too wild, not too isolated, but we taught him certain things using a wooden sword, and then we brought him into a cold immersion into a lake, and we challenged him. And then in the evening, because of my spiritual training, I suppose, or my natural leaning towards that, we did a whole sort of I Ching, oracle, dragon cards, spiritual insights, and it took him about a week for it to integrate.
Yeah, integration is so important, eh?
Yeah, and then he had this huge kind of meltdown with his father, and I said, "Look, I'm really sorry. Does he need, So he said, "No, this is great." Because now he's realizing the direction he's going in is just not really where he wants to be. He wants to actually go out and help people. He doesn't want to be going into law or economics or what everybody else is doing. He wants to go out there and find something that helps people.
Yeah.
So
that's crucial. That's crucial. Like, because what's happening there is like, here, look, this is a life's purpose. So when I get to my okay, imagine that you rock up to a funeral back when you were allowed have funerals, that is, of any sort of, pre-COVID funeral, right?
Yeah.
Where you rock up and there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, right?
Yeah. Or thousands if you live in West Cork.
Or thousands, yeah. Let's imagine it's in a church, just because I reckon most people will relate to this one, is that, you are present in your spiritual form and you're listening to what people have to say about you. So 3 people get up, a family member, partner, and your children, and maybe a 4th person from the community. What legacy have you left with these people? Like, what sort of an impact and a contribution have you made to your community, your family, and etc.? Like, what do you want that to be? And trace the steps backwards to where you are currently and understand what do you need to do the same but more consistently, or what do you need to do differently in order for that to be a potential reality, because that's what you need to do. And if that means making some changes around what you do for your living, or understanding that working a job without having a plan for what you're going to do with the rest of your time that might give you some freedom and distance between you and uncomfortable decisions you might have to make in this ever-changing climate we're in, best to maybe start to make some of those decisions. And that means surround yourself around people that are already doing that. That makes sense. But it also means that you gotta take the time to go through that process with yourself. Nobody can do it for you. I talk to people all the time and say, what do you want? Time, money, freedom. I was like, that's not what you want. It's ridiculous. It's like, you want a result. That's not a life's purpose. What are you going to lie on your deathbed and go, I had time, money, freedom, yuppie? What about everybody else around you? How are they feeling? So, and what were you doing every day? So you could have time, money, freedom, and then be doing cocaine all day. Yeah. For 50 years. Well, it probably wouldn't last that long. But like, that's not a contribution, So, So the thing about it is what would you do with your day if you didn't have to spend most of it working for or thinking about money? And you had all the time in the day. Well, how would you spend it? What would you do to contribute? What would that function be in the society, the community, or whatever that you part of or build or whatever? That's what's, I think, important for us to consider. Mm-hmm. And you talked about a way of getting into your center, and Qigong is something that keeps coming up for me recently. I've never tried it, and it sounds fascinating. And I have a feeling.
Let's meet up and make it happen. I think you'd love it, and you can teach me how to sea swim, because I'm terrified of cold water. So,
okay, and I might touch on that just a little bit. I've 8 days in a row, so every day this year I've been in the sea.
Yeah.
And some of those days it's been calm. Some of those days I've nearly got taken out by a giant wave.
Wow.
But nonetheless, I got in and I got out, and I felt amazing. Right? Now, what's interesting is I normally go in around 12 noon, okay? Because I work from home and I live beside the sea, so I can go in at whatever time. Yeah. And so on the way down, I'm like, oh, it's probably going to be cold.
Yeah.
Of course it's going to be cold. It's the bloody sea in winter, right? And I'm going to go, I wonder if I could, nobody knows I'm here and nobody knows I'm supposed to be doing this. So maybe I could just not do it and nobody would know, which is also true. But I'd know, right? And, whether I do it every day or not, nobody cares whether I go in the sea or like, what am I like, there's a world watching. No, nobody's paying attention. They don't care what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. So it's really just important for me, right? Which is a good place to be in, this culture of Instagram and social media where we believe the world really cares any way, shape or form what we do from day to day. It's pretty hilarious because they don't care. They're just looking for something to look at so they don't have to look at themselves. But imagine I'm on my way down and I get down to the sea. And I'm looking, oh, that's a pretty big wave. I don't know, maybe I could, but I don't have a bat. So I'm like, this is the only option. Oh, okay. And so in I go, and it's traumatic. It's very obviously traumatic, and it's immediately traumatic, and it doesn't get less traumatic. Mm. But what happens is you are consciously choosing to go into a challenging environment consciously. And so you learn to breathe under duress, and you learn to come back to your center using your breath while under very obvious constraints and duress, right? Mm-hmm. Now, what that means is that equally, when you put your head under the water, which is not the favorite part, obviously, I like to do it 5 times in a row just to really give the brain a wake up. And I don't wear shoes or gloves or anything, regardless of what time of the year it is, because I want to feel it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when I'm in there, all thoughts of what's going on in the world disappear. All thoughts of what's going on in my own world disappear. All thoughts of what happened before I got into the water disappear. Everything is focused on the present moment, on breathing. It's the only thing that's going to get me from where I am back onto the shore. I have no choice. And it's once you do that consciously often enough, you recognize that you can learn to regulate your own emotional and mental state because you've gone in a controlled way, a conscious, intentional choice to go into that environment and come out stronger. Now, obviously, you're going to be hit with challenges during the day. And how you interpret them will depend on how you master the experience or whether or not you overcome them or not. So if you get hit by some curveball later in the day and you're like, man, I nearly died today. Yeah. So in comparative terms, I couldn't feel my feet for 2.5 hours today. And after I came out of the sea, 2.5 hours. I was so full of the joy of being still alive that this curveball means nothing. You're like, whatever, no problem, And so it's a very different, because any day that I don't go into the sea, it's palpably different in the way that I respond to things. You know what I mean? So there's something to be said for that. Not pleasant though.
It's become so popular in Ireland. I mean, I'm still like, I used to work 6 days a week in the clinic. I've gone down to 3 days a week and have 4 days at home. And I had a big.
How are you finding that?
Love it. I'm actually, at a personal level, it's given me more space to work on other projects like this. I'm actually not financially any worse off. In any way. Because I'm paying less tax. And it's making me reevaluate personally where I need to be for the next 5 years or 10 years. Like for me, I'm like you. I like to I have a purpose. Like my old teacher who died said, people live longest when they have a purpose. But I see them and they go out and they're going out, and there's people that I would have treated 16 years ago in Dublin, 17 years ago in Dublin, and they're now sea swimming, and they never would have done it 16, 17 years ago. And they look healthier, they look stronger, they're happier, they've reduced their hours, not working as much, manic. There isn't that sort of chaos, that constant commute. For me, it's a bit of a journey for me to work. I'm quite far away from the clinic, but I build my day around that, so to make it easier for me. So I'm up really early before everyone's commuting, and I'm into the clinic early, and I set it up. I lie down, I put needles in myself, and I chill out, and I wait, and I just wait. It might be an hour, and then I have self-treatment, and then I'm ready to start the day, and then I'll go. And then I'll wait till all the traffic's died down, and then I get in the car and I go again and I go home. And then the following day, like today, Monday, I haven't worked on Monday in years. I think I read a statistic about the level of heart attacks in men on a Monday morning. And that didn't frighten me, but I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if you didn't work Mondays? So, it was like, let's take a Monday off. And when everybody's out there rushing and doing their thing, I'm here with you, having this amazing conversation. Now, there are certain things I'd like to improve, and there are other projects I want to do, but the focus at the moment is doing this, keeping the house going, doing some decorations. I'm currently in one of the bedrooms here because I couldn't use the downstairs room because my wife's doing yoga. Isn't that amazing? So it's a different life, isn't it? It's a completely different life. I'm
in the process of changing these curtains over here behind me. These are hilarious.
Yeah.
Which,
they're very 90s.
They're very 90s.
They're very 90s. I remember renting an apartment in Limerick with curtains, like tartan kind of. Yeah,
this is the vibe elsewhere, though.
Oh,
see over here,
I see. You're one
got
of those.
This going.
Very nice.
And I got a shamanic drum over there. I just need to sort out the curtains, otherwise we're good to go.
Perfect. So that's your little man cave, effectively.
Yeah, that's my office. That's my vision board behind me over there.
Yeah. I have a man cave downstairs. On the next one we do, I'll show it to you. It's big. Like I've got a treadmill in there, kettlebells. Nice. I've got an old school desk. I'm going to redecorate it. I've got a nice Harley Davidson thing I'm going to put up. I'm not musical. I don't play any instruments, but I'm looking maybe to take up the didgeridoo. And I have a fascination with the hurdy-gurdy. You know the hurdy-gurdy?
I do.
Yeah, and I love the sound of that medieval drone, you know. It's just, but, you know, it's quite a complicated instrument to learn. So, well, we'll give it a go anyway.
Just remember those 4 stages of learning, though, right? Because it doesn't matter how complicated it is. It just matters whether you can recognize, you know, that there's 4 stages to go through. And you just need to identify which one you're in, and that'll inform your practice.
Very good. So we are well over the hour. We were supposed to do half an hour, but there you go. Loads of information for you. So how can people connect with you, Lloyd? Because I can leave a link below on whatever platform this goes to. Usually what I do is I put it out through a BuzzFeed, and BuzzFeed then drips it into different things. And then if with your permission, we'll have it on some sort of YouTube, UTARD, as you would say, or thing. We haven't mentioned anything too controversial yet, so we'll put it out there. But maybe in the next one. So we'll put it out there. But how can people get hold of you, you know?
Well, I was tempted to just remind everyone of that movie. What's the one? That one about the Australian chap goes to New York. He goes, "That's not a knife. This is a knife."
Yeah. Crocodile Dundee.
Crocodile. I was going to say Crocodile Dundee. When you get that boomerang on a string and you swing it over your head, and I'll come running.
Yeah, that's the one.
But apart from that, apart from that, you can find me. I'm not a hard man to find, I'll be honest. So you can find me on Instagram for Go to Lloyd. Go, the number 2, LLOYD. Okay. You can find me. My website is gotoloyd.com. And on Facebook, it's Lloyd Chambers.
Okay.
And there's a picture of me with Russell Brand, so you can't really miss it.
Yeah.
And so I mean, really, my interest is surrounding myself and supporting people who have a desire to take personal responsibility for where they're at, to move into a mode of forgiveness for themselves and others, and who are open to collaboration of some sort. That's the starting point for me. Mm-hmm. So if that's you and you're listening to this and you're curious as to how that might apply, give us a shout. I'm happy to talk to you. And
point out also, you're an author, right? You have a book. I know we talked about that. And
my book is about visualization.
Yeah, show me.
Put it up here. It's called Visualization to Realization. Bob Proctor wrote the foreword to it. Nice. And it's co-authored in 2018. So it's a good book to start with, to give you some simple, easy practices to help you get clear on how you can start to develop a picture of what it is that you want and get emotionally involved with that picture, among other things.
Thanks, Lloyd. Shall we end with a meditation for everyone? Do you want to facilitate that for us?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I want everybody to take a moment to simply close your eyes. We're just going to do some breathing. It's very simple. So we're going to take inhale for 4, going to hold for 4. We're going to exhale for 4. We're going to hold for 4. This is called box breathing. Okay. And as you inhale, I want you to just inhale light, peace, love, acceptance. Okay. And as we exhale, I want you to exhale fear, pain, suffering, and let it go. Okay, so we're going to inhale 2, 3, 4, and hold 2, 3, 4, and exhale 2, 3, 4, and hold. Then we'll do it again 2 more times. So inhale. And release. And hold. And last time again, we inhale. And hold. And exhale. And hold. And hold for as long as you can at the bottom of this breath. And inhale again. And I just wonder, while your eyes are still closed, I want you to repeat after me a couple of words in Sanskrit. Okay, the first word is Om. Second word is Paramatma. The third is Name. And the fourth is Nama. Okay, so it goes like this. Om Paramatmane Nama.
Om Paramat Namate Ma.
And we'll do it 2 more times. Om Paramat Mane Nama. And 1 more time. Om Paramat Mane Nama. And just sit with that for a second. You might notice that you're perspiring in different places that you might not normally. You might feel a lot of tingling in your fingers. Certainly feel something has changed in that, because oftentimes we're not in the present. So what that means, Om Paramat Name Nama, means to let go of the past as we sit in the present. Okay, and it's just a lovely way, which I learned in the School of Philosophy. In between every class, we used to repeat this 3 times, just to let go of whatever we were focused on for the last class, and then to start fresh in the present for the next class. So
very good, yeah. Lloyd. And that's the first time I've ever done anything like that. I know I've obviously studied, looked at those different chants. I tend to practice more of a healing sounds thing. That's what works for me. And we make a very long out breath. So there are different ones for different organs. Oh, yeah. Yeah, but that's great. Thank you so much for being here. If anyone wants to, thanks for listening, everyone. If anyone wants to join Lloyd and collaborate with him on this compounding work that he's doing, then I'll leave links below in the descriptions. And thanks for being here. I really appreciate you giving up so much of your time today on a Monday. And once I've edited this, I'll put it out there and let's see, let the joy spread around and see, can people move towards, as you say, moving more towards that idea of working with their own joy, what drives them through their joy. Would be interesting to see.
Yeah.
So thanks very much, Lloyd. I'm going to pause this recording and say thanks very much for joining.
Thank you.